Hello, friends. I hope all of you are doing great. So let's understand this. Many a times when we have conversations with people, there are certain conversations which are absolutely difficult. We call them difficult conversations. And especially at the workplace, these conversations happen a lot of times. For example, if you're going to appear for an interview, that's a difficult conversation. Or if you're going to talk to your management about performance issues, or for that matter, you're going to negotiate with a client, or you're trying to talk with a colleague with whom you had a conflict recently. Now, all these conversations are difficult. So what really makes the conversations difficult? Well, many things, but there are two particular things I would like to talk about. One is there is something at stake for you. So for example, either there is something monetary gain or loss involved in the conversation, like for example, in a negotiation, or for that matter, the emotions are running really, really high. So these two are things that you'll definitely see in any difficult conversation. Sometimes it's a bit of both, actually. So we need to understand and identify if there is a plan or a strategy that we could have whenever we have to deal with difficult conversations, because we can't shy away from it. Difficult conversations are a part and parcel of our life. So we've got to take them head on. So what is it that we can do? So 5 tricks to deal with difficult conversations, typically at the workplace. First and foremost, before you step into a difficult conversation, try to visualize the conversation. So what that means is you simply close your eyes. Let's say there are 15 minutes to go for you for the conversation. Just try to play the whole conversation at the back of your mind. What is it the other person is saying? What is it that you are saying? What is being discussed? What is the conclusion? How do you want the conversation to conclude? All of that. So play the entire conversation at the back of your mind with a victory for you at the end. Of course, with a victory for you does not necessarily mean defeat for the other person, but what you're essentially aiming for is a result that you're satisfied or happy with. So visualizing the conversation makes it that much more simpler for you because you're already in sync with what you need to do when the actual conversation takes place. So visualization is a very, very powerful technique, but seldom used. A lot of people don't use it, but I think it's beautifully crafted for you to prepare for any difficult conversation. Number 2, when you are in the midst of conversation, it's important for you that you respond to what is being asked, but don't react to what is happening there. Now, what is typically the difference between the two? When you think of response, it is a very, very thoughtful choice of words. So you're thinking about what you want to say based on what the other person has said or has done. Whereas in a reaction, it's a very, very spontaneous piece of action on your part. So someone says you are mad, you say you are mad, right? So that's reaction. But when someone says, oh, you're mad, you say, all right, if you think so, but I don't understand why you think about me like that. What you've done is you have chosen your words and then you said something. So that pause that you take is a very, very critical pause. So very important that you practice this pause. And hence in any conversation, whether it's a negotiation or an interview or a conversation with a colleague about a conflict, it's important that you respond to what has been asked of you, which means it's okay to take your time. A lot of people believe that in order to achieve fluency in the conversation, you got to respond to everything immediately, spontaneously. But that's not true. In fact, response requires time. You heard that right. Response requires time. So if you're not sure, you can take your own time. You can tell the other person that, look, I understand where you're coming from, but I need to think this through. Sometimes, if you don't need to think it through, you can take a momentary pause to just think and play in your minds what words, what vocabulary would you want to use to put forth your point in a way that it drives home the point without hurting sentiments or without creating any chaos during the conversation. So response is very important, not the reaction. Number 3, be very, very curious to listen to what the other person has said. Now, when you're curious, you cannot be afraid. It's almost that curiosity and fear don't coexist. So it's important that you show curiosity in the course of the conversation. I'm excited to learn what you have to say. I'm curious to hang on to everything the other person is trying to tell me. Now, when you have a curious bent of mind, you're almost like a child with a clean slate. You want to understand where the other person is coming from. What is it that he or she is trying to convey in the message that is being given right now? So curiosity is a very essential element. In fact, at the beginning of the conversation, you could tell the other person, I'm really curious for this meeting. I really need to know and understand your point of view as well. So curiosity is a great way of establishing rapport with the other person. And at the same time, it will also help you deep dive and empathize with what the other person is expecting from the conversation. So curiosity is a great friend when you walk into a tough or a difficult conversation. Number 4, observe your body language. In fact, you should observe your body language not just during the course of the meeting, but before you start a difficult conversation. For instance, take about 30 seconds to stand in front of a mirror right before the conversation and understand what is happening inside of you and what is the expression that you have on your face. A lot of time people have a very, very angry facial expression because they feel disappointed, agitated, or they feel cheated. And therefore, before they walk into the conversation, it clearly shows on their face that they're about to smash someone, either physically or maybe verbally. So if you see a reaction like that on your face, perhaps you might want to take a few more minutes to control your expressions as well. You can control your expressions once you're conscious about how your expressions are and what message do they convey. So it's okay to take a few moments, before you step into that conversation. Do you really need to smile all the time? Not necessarily, but if you can smile right at the beginning, it helps you ease into the conversation, right? So that's a good thing to do right at the outset, where you say that, good to meet you, and then you start the conversation with a smile. But more importantly, look out for the nuances in your body language. For example, if your shoulders are drooping, or your head is falling down, or you're failing to make an eye contact, all of these are indicators that there is a lot of nervousness inside of you, which is being felt right now. So what you do when you feel that nervousness is to, one, breathe deeply so that you can get rid of your nervousness. Secondly, take a few moments to look into the mirror and just smile at yourself. That also helps you relax yourself, cool your muscles, and then you walk in with a proper body posture. So if you don't feel confident, sometimes it's good enough to fake confidence before you step into the meeting, because you can carry that body language and the indication to the other person is, I am feeling confident about this. Sometimes it's good to do that because then you feel relaxed and you feel more at ease even during these tough conversations or difficult conversations. So observe your body language very, very minutely. Perhaps it's a good idea to also observe the body language of the other person. Sometimes you might see that the other person is either very angry or intimidated or frustrated or too excited. So if you see those kind of expressions, you may want to point that out at times if required. You look to be very silent right now. Is there anything that's bothering you? Or you look or you appear to be very upset. I'm sorry about that, but is there any particular reason for that? So when you do this, the other person also understands that my body language is conveying a message. And if it's not conveying the right message, perhaps I need to change something here. So observe your body language, observe the other person's body language. Very, very critical. But more importantly, this won't happen unless you have practiced all of this. So how do you put all of this together? So let's say, for example, you're going to get into a very tough negotiation with a client who is important to you and who wouldn't budge easily, right? So in spite of all your efforts, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to convince the client. So what do you do in that case? You don't know how the client is going to react to your questions. You may not expect the client to respond. The client might react to your situation. So it's important that you practice this. So what do you mean by practice? So request one of your colleagues to act as a client with whom you should have this conversation, typically a day in advance, before the actual conversation takes place. Sometimes your colleague might play the role of an interviewer. Sometimes your friend might play the role of your manager or your boss. Any person with whom you're going to have a conversation, request your colleague, your friend, or even a family member to enact the role of that person with whom you're expecting to have a conversation the very next day or maybe in the next few days. Now, what this does is that it allows you to prepare. It allows you to understand, okay, this is where I am fumbling. So I need to be good about this. I need to be really confident about this point. Or for that matter, oh my God, I don't have an answer for this question, right? So I need to prepare for an answer. Or for that matter, what should I say when someone says this? So these are all questions for which you will be able to find out answers. And preparation for a difficult conversation gives you a lot of confidence. Unfortunately, a lot of times we step into a difficult conversation without having prepared for it. Now, what I mean by preparation is both physical and mental preparation. So body language is more about the physical preparation. Visualization is more about the mental preparation. Similarly, when you practice, when you rehearse for a difficult conversation, it allows you the opportunity to reflect on places where you're currently going wrong and what rectifications do you need to make. So those are 5 simple tips that you could try and put into practice before you step into a difficult conversation. Remember, what makes a conversation difficult is a lack of practice, or for that matter, the fears that we have at the back of our mind. Once we encounter the fears bravely, we are ready for almost any difficult conversation, no matter who the other person is. So what you need to do is these 5 things. Number 1, visualize. Think about the entire conversation and assume victory by the end of it. Remember, victory does not mean defeat for the other person, but a successful outcome of the conversation. Number 2, respond but don't react. There would be situations in a conversation where the other person might throw a fit of rage at you, or you might get too excited, but it's important that you take a moment of pause before you make up your mind what to say next. Number 3, be very, very curious, just like a child, to listen to what the other person has to say. Where is he or she coming from? Why is he or she saying this? And is this really making a difference to what I'm thinking? How do I prepare my answers here? All of that is going to be very, very important. Number 4, observe your body language. Right before you step in for that important conversation, look at your expressions, look at your shoulders, look at where your eyesight is. Are you making an eye contact? And that will help you make all the small changes before you step into the conversation. And even during the course of the conversation, observe your body language and the other person's body language. Number 5, practice. There is nothing that works better than a good rehearsal, either with a colleague or a friend or a family member. So if you put into implementation these 5 tips, I'm sure no conversation will come across as being difficult. It might be slightly more complex. That's okay, but it need not be difficult. It need not weigh heavily on our minds. So next time when you're preparing for an interview or a client negotiation or a performance conversation with your boss or a conflict conversation with a colleague or any other conversation, you should be able to control the situation and maximize on your advantage. So try these, and who knows, you'll be able to master difficult conversations. And if you come up with 1 or 2 more tips that I haven't covered, perhaps you can add that to the list too. So I would love to hear from you. Until that time, wishing you all the very best. Let's see what results you get from this.